How did Ignatius navigate life and his choices following his conversion? What action did Ignatius take that left him in tears? This and more we will learn on episode 4 of St. Ignatius of Loyola, Getting to Know Him. So we're having a little change of scenery. I'm on the rooftop of our Jesuit community, Columbia in Los Angeles. And before I begin today's presentation, I know we just had a new stay-at-home order. Indoor activities are going to be stopped, so some of us may be feeling down a little bit. So I thought before we get into what we have for today, go back to the scene where Father JT and I had a little video and get you moving, all right? So let's do this. Go with me. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy. One more time. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Woo! All right. How do you feel? Tell me, how do you feel? Thank me later. Thank me later. So let's get into it for today. So just thinking about an act. We had a brief interruption, but so the acronym for today, I thought of C's, just a lot of C's. Sometimes when you watch movies and they have CC, closed caption, Today, I would describe part of the beginning journey of Ignatius's conversion experience with the words, well, first he's a convert, so there's that conversion. I would also describe it as some confusion. A confession took place as part of this whole experience, and compassion, I would say. So let's get into it for a little bit, Sometimes we think, wow, right after the conversion, everything goes smooth sailing, he lives happily ever after. Well, not quite, That's why I use the word confusion, because immediately after the very first sense of his conversion, Ignatius actually started to think, like, what am I going to do with my life? And he was a little bit confused between, okay, I feel like I want to go to Jerusalem. I want to spend my time there. But at the same time, I feel like I need to live a life of penance for my sins. And so his thoughts kind of went between, do I go and become a Carthusian, like this monk where I can live my life in penance and prayer? But then he had this pool of wanting to go to Jerusalem and spending his time there. And so anyway, he really decided to head on his way to Jerusalem. But there was that kind of confusion. So sometimes when we have questions about our vocation, what to do, this is a normal thing. And Ignatius was always kind of questioning himself in terms of where to go and where is the Lord leading him. Well, as a new convert, sometimes we have a lot of fervor and we just want to do so much. But also Ignatius described himself at that time as someone who did not have what he would call discretion and prudence and taking into consideration the circumstances around him. There was just this kind of impetus and fervor in him. And I don't know if you know this, but a tidbit, usually most religious communities will not allow a new convert to join that community. They usually need to have the person to have been converted for 3 years, because that initial fervor can just be a time of a lot of stuff going on, right? Need some consistency. So Ignatius kind of heads out on his journey. He pays some of the debts that he owes, and he decides to make his way to Jerusalem. Well, here's a little part about the confusion and navigating some of his early decisions. So, as he's going on his journey on a mule, he runs into a Moor. That's somebody who embraces the Islam, right? A Muslim. And they get into this conversation. And of course, the conversation turns to Mary, Our Lady. And of course, Ignatius is arguing and with him, or they're discussing. And the Muslim agrees, about the virgin birth when it comes to Jesus. But then that she remained ever virgin, he just wasn't convinced. And Ignatius tried all he could, and he couldn't convince this man. And so the Muslim he went ahead on his mule, ahead of Ignatius. And Ignatius kind of started to think about what had happened. And he thought, hey, I can't let this person talk about Our Lady like that. I didn't defend her honor enough. And he started to think, you know what? I need to have that man have a taste of my dagger. That's the kind of state he was in at the time. My goodness. And he was so torn about this decision. Should I let him go? Should I let him have a taste of my dagger? Do you know what he did? Wonder of wonders. Ignatius left the decision to his mule. Oh my goodness. So the Moor went down one road and Ignatius was to go down another road. And his thought process was, should the mule go towards the road that the Muslim took, he would let him have a taste of his dagger. But if he went the other way, then he would let him go. Oh, thanks be to God, the mule had a little bit better sense than Inigo. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a society of Jesus today. My goodness. I just want to add that Ignatius did have a kind of devotion to Our Lady. Actually, before he first left for this journey, he went to a church and a shrine of Our Lady. It's called Our Lady of Aranzazu, there in northern Spain, not too far from where he lived. I had the opportunity to visit there, and this Our Lady of Aranzazu is about that tiny, sitting on like a huge pillar up on the church. You have to kind of try to go up there to see it. We got an opportunity to actually get close. But anyway, Ignatius had this devotion to Our Lady, and it continued even as he journeyed on his way and he got to Montserrat. And that was a place where there was a monastery. So he got there and spent some days there, and he actually did his confession. So he did a whole life confession, which is a practice that he's passed on to us, and it's encouraged for us to do that once in a while. And it took 3 days. Had a lot of sins, to confess, but it took 3 days. And then he dropped his sword that he had at the foot of Our Lady of Montserrat, and he spent the whole night in vigil there. So this was a moment of kind of a commitment to this conversion, of leaving the past behind and embracing a whole new life. And so he had read some stuff in some books, Amadis of Gaul, and he had read things like knights doing a whole vigil on their knees, praying and offering their lives. So he did the same thing, spent the whole night in prayer, offered his sword to Our Lady, went out and found a poor man and exchanged his clothes for the poor man's, And so this was really a beautiful, beautiful act of kind of embracing this whole new life with God. Well, he continues on, leaving that place to go towards Barcelona, from Montserrat to Barcelona, but he didn't want to take all the broad streets in case someone would recognize him, So he was trying to battle this whole vainglory, that sin we talked about in the earlier episode. And so as he went on this journey, somebody started to follow him, and they were kind of calling out to him. And when he turned around, the person asked, "Hey, did you give your clothes to some poor man as he's saying that happened? And Ignatius said, yes, that he did that. And of course, he suddenly realized that the poor man was probably being accused of stealing or taking the clothes when Ignatius had simply given it to him out of, this desire to embrace a new life. And so just feeling such intense compassion for the man brought tears to his eyes, right? This is the answer to that question. What was the action that led Ignatius to tears? It was this sense of compassion for this poor man who was being falsely accused because of his little act of mercy, work of mercy. And this was a little bit of a struggle because Ignatius was trying to avoid this kind of notoriety or fame, but word started to spread around about the things that he did, helping the poor and giving people rent and all this stuff. But it wasn't part of what he really wanted on his journey. So we're seeing the beginnings of this new life, how there was some confusion, how he had this cult, you could say, or devotion to Our Lady, his making of his confession, and embracing this new life by being so close to the poor. I think imitating St. Francis, giving his clothes to the poor and beginning this journey. And so on our next episode, we'll continue to hear more about Ignatius, who is now a pilgrim on the way as he continues to learn and grow in this new life in the Spirit, in this conversion. Well, that's it for episode 4 of St. Ignatius of Loyola, Getting to Know Him. AMDG. Blessings to you all.